Go ahead and get started now, and I would ask that we rise and for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For which it
Okay, Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, just a couple things I'd like to add to the agenda. The one is on the, I went over and checked some of the documents, and I need to add the fire chief and the police chief. Their contracts have expired, and then also I'd like to add the building and planning director on there.
I'm not,
to make it match the other one.
Yeah, actually, that's not true. I've got the schedule of all of the contracts, and actually, Miss Blaine asked for that earlier today, and Miss Niedzwicki emailed her copies of all the contracts. So we can cover that when we get to that agenda item. But there.
Okay, well, that's kind of weird because the clerk's supposed to have all current documents, and
I
she
agree.
just got those documents. These things.
I did not say that. I did not say she just got them. She needed another copy apparently because we don't. These things are negotiated.
She did not have them.
Well, these things.
I have show that they both expired in 19.
Yeah.
Both of them expired in 19.
Yeah, that's not the case. We can show you the contracts if you want. But,
all right, well, she should have had those all along. The other thing
I agree. She should have.
Talk about the front desk office.
Yep.
So I need to put that on the agenda.
Okay, we can talk about staffing for the front. But those contracts are valid that we sent out, and we can get to, when we get to that, I'll bring up those other contracts, but they are not expired yet.
Right, but the one for the planning, I want that to match the same as the other ones.
Well, we can bring that up when we get to that agenda item.
Okay, great.
Okay. Miss Lane?
I hope I'm unmuted. Because we're having problem with some of the board members when we have votes, and I think some of the votes, could they just raise their hands, or could I call them after the meeting, Mr. Laddie, when these are sort of routine things, and see if they are in favor of them and add them to the vote?
Well, it looks like Ken's on there already.
I understand the desire to make this as smooth as possible, considering how awkward it is to have these meetings, but I prefer if you continue to take the long road and go through the vote.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think the votes have to happen during the meeting. But if we can't hear you, just raise your hand with aye or nay or whatever. So hopefully, I think we can hear from everybody except for.
Get something, you know.
Right. So I guess we're stuck on the agenda.
Well,
Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
I'm willing to approve the consent agenda and the regular agenda, understanding that you're saying that contracts and the staffing at the front office are going to be already discussed.
Yep, absolutely. I'll discuss the staffing under mine.
All right.
Okay, I'll support it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
All right, Mr. Mansour.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas? Mr. Massey?
yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Guzak?
This one question, that means that the planning and building director is going to be extended to January 31st, 2021 like the other ones?
No, it means that it'll be on the agenda to discuss it.
Well, his contract expires.
It does not. His contract does not expire until January 1st.
January 1st of 2021.
Right. And the board takes.
Everybody else goes to get to 2000.
No, they don't.
It's go to 31st.
Well, is your vote a no or a yes?
It's a no. You're not letting me finish.
Okay.
It says right here, it says January 31st, 2021 on section G.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, and that's for everybody else. So why isn't he considered the same? Why is he being...
We'll discuss that. Continue, Ms. Lane.
May I clarify, Mr. Guzak, how are you voting on the agenda?
He said no.
Well, you gonna let me talk on that?
when we get to that portion of the agenda.
All right, okay, I'll vote yes, and then I'll see what the,
Okay. I'm yes, and Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, so we have public comment at this time. And Mr. Beller, anybody have their hand raised? Again, to raise your hand, what you're going to do is you're going to go to the bottom right go to the bottom of your page and go to participants, click on the participants icon, and it will, the participant list will show up on the right. If you go down to the bottom of the participants list, there should be a hand that you click on, that you click on, and it will raise your hand. I'm sorry? Joe Johnson. Okay, go ahead. Mr. Johnson, go ahead, you're unmuted.
Hi. Yeah, so I guess tonight one of the agenda items is to talk about the taxation increase, right?
It's to talk about the truth in taxation, yes.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I guess to that point, when we get to that, I guess I can raise my hand. I don't want to hold up the agenda at this time, but if you wish essentially, right, I'd like to understand what's driving the request for additional millage, right? Essentially, it's clear that you guys are looking for the majority of it is administration. There's some police and fire, etc. My question lies in what due to the COVID has increased the operational budget of the township.
Right. I appreciate your question, Mr. Johnson. Well, there won't be any public comment during the public hearing, I don't believe, but am I correct, Mr. Laddie? I don't believe we have.
No, I think we do have to have our last.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, we will have public comment on that, Mr. Johnson. I unfortunately we didn't stick that on the agenda, but we'll make sure that we have that. But the bottom line is that it's a rollback that we're looking at, not necessarily us voting on a tax increase. However, we have to word it that way. But we'll explain that further. Our assessing director, Becky Salvati, will explain what that 3% difference is basically with regard to the head limit. Mr. Laddie?
Mr. Chair, I do on my agenda, I see right under public comments, public hearing for truth in taxation.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. All right. So thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anybody else? I think Mr. Ert, I got a message from him that he is having trouble finding the hand raise button. If you want to unmute Mr. Ert, I believe. Mr. Ert, you need to unmute your line. Okay,
okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. No, I'm all set. I was just pushing the wrong button. I got my computer working. I didn't have anything to say. Thank you, though.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else have public comment? Looks like I just received. What's that? I just received an email here from. Let me see here. From Maria Hobson, 8389 Parkside Drive. Let's see here. I heard the citizens' comment at the meeting at the end of August. My interpretation was that she was asking if anything had been filed as a result of the bad behavior of the board. I had no reason to believe this random resident knew about the grievance on the agenda before it was on the agenda, but I guess it really doesn't make any difference if she did or not. Then Trustee Mansour put on a big show acting like he's never heard of it until the meeting Tuesday. Let's say, for example, we believe this, after all of his deceit, should be have done preparation as soon as the agenda was out last week. Given the behavior, I would tend to believe he's treating all residents like we're fools. I believe the four trustees discussed it prior to the meeting, as I believe they've done several times in the past year. As far as the grievance, there have been many policies regarding board interference with day-to-day operations in contacting employees directly. I know the Delaney's personally, and I know that was one of the things that the late, great Mr. Bill Delaney, supervisor, Rest in peace, my friend, did not tolerate. Again, this board thinks it's the first Grand Blanc Township board ever and doesn't follow rules. I hope there's another policy written in regards to board member harassment and intimidation, but I also hope there are some sort of consequences for any obvious violation that should not have been written to be common sense. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor, and I'd also like to thank Mr. Guzak and Ms. Lane for their dedication and professionalism. The trustees could learn from them. So, okay. Any other public comment, Mr. Beller? Okay. We're going to close public comment and move to the public hearing for the truth in taxation. And let's bring on Ms. Salvati, our Director of Assessing. What's that? Okay.
There she is.
Need to unmute your line, Ms. Salvati. Okay, there you go.
Better?
Yes.
Okay. We're here for truth and taxation. This group has done this 3 times before. I left out a lot of the calculations this time to just kind of get you to understand why we have to do this. A lot of this Headley rollback is caused by properties uncapping. Because we can't collectively as a township collect any more monies than we did in the prior year and our new construction unless we go through this hearing. The only thing we're going to capture by going through this hearing is the cost of living adjustment. And that's in the prior paperwork. I had showed that it was about $173,000 that we were going to be able to capture. And that's why we're here, for that money for the township. I know the notice says that it's an increase in taxes. What it is an increase over the base tax rate. We have to go down to the base tax rate. And by having this hearing, we can capture that other little amount of monies. If you look at the 4029 that I gave you, the only increase in the tax rate that there was for mosquito millage. And that is basically because we have not topped out. If you look at column 4, our original millage was 0.2377. And if you look at column 9, 2332, we're only asking 0.1546. So we haven't maxed out there. The other areas we've already maxed out, and we have to take the rollback on those particular millages. There's no way around it. Everybody in the county has to go through this hearing if they haven't already established their budget for the year. So anybody that doesn't have their budget already set for the year has to go through this hearing. And that's what we're doing, is we're voting to capture the cost of living adjustment. So, are there any questions from you?
So, Ms. Salvati, just for the public, let's say somebody's taxes are $2,000. Are they going to see an increase in their taxes for next year?
They will in the mosquito millage.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that cost of living is. I'll give you an example. If this year your taxable value is $100,000 and the millage rate is 7 mills for all of the township activities, that's going to be $700. Let's say the cost of living next year is 2%. So you're going to have a taxable value of 102. thousand. On that $2,000, you would think you're gonna pay 7 mills or another $14. We're rolling back the millage, so instead of the $14, you're gonna pay 0.9960 less than the $14. So
Okay.
if people look back at their tax bills, you should see a small decrease in the amount you're paying for your services unless it's gone to a vote of the people. The fire millage went to a vote of the people a few years ago. The police millage went to a vote of the people, and they voted to restore it to its original amount. The Parks and Rec, that was passed in 2016. It was passed at 0.25 mils. They're currently down to 0.2454 mils. We have to take those rollbacks. The state builds it in through the Headley Amendment. It has to be done. You can't avoid it. The only way you could avoid it, possibly the police and fire would be able to avoid it if they went to a special assessment millage. But then you're going to have a lot more poverty applicants. The disabled vets going to be questionable because the special assessments aren't tax write-offs on their for their income taxes and stuff. So that'd be something for the next board to decide. But we're just trying to capture that other $173,000 that we can legally get by voting yes for this millage.
Okay. Does our board have any questions or comments? Mr. Massey? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Mr. Massey.
What happens if we, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I had not addressed you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
What happens if we vote no?
Go ahead, Ms. Salvati.
Release 174,000.
If you vote no, you might as well not come to vote at all because it will automatically go down to that base tax rate. Instead of 0.9960, it would be 0.9774 is what all of those millages from last year would be reduced to. So if you take all of what's in column 9, what's in column 5, and multiply it by 0.9774, it would reduce our millage even more, and you'd lose $173,000 that you legally could get for the township.
So in most of these millages even, we're below what was voted on. I mean,
Certainly.
So
Our operating millage, Maria Hobson spoke of Bill Delaney. He was here back in '78 when the original millage was set at 5 mils. We didn't even use the 5 mils. For many years, we were at 3.85 mils, I think. So we kept taking those rollbacks, but the taxpayers never saw it because we were only levying 3.85 mils. So on paper, we were taking the rollbacks, but the taxpayers weren't seeing it. This didn't start happening until we had our last economic downfall in 2009, I think it was, when we had to start holding these hearings to be able to capture all of the money that we were able to. And we always voted to pass this to
So I think
the
it's
most money that we are able to legally.
So I think it's important for our taxpayers, our residents, to understand that we're actually paying less money than what was approved by the voters for these various millages even. And
When people say that we have to lessen the taxes, well, the state's doing that for us right now.
Yeah.
They're making us take the rollback.
Well, I think what's confusing for people too is, unless they look at their tax bill and really examine it, about 17% of their tax bill actually comes to the township. The rest of it goes to all of the other entities that we're the collection agency for. And
Absolutely.
and so we pay that money out to everybody from Mott Community College to the GISD to the county, what have you. And while a number of those entities have been increasing, you know, their taxes, our township has not. You know, other than the millage for the parks a couple of years ago and police, what have you, and those are voted on by our residents, not by this board. So in reality, we're collecting less each year than what actually the voters approved. Now, the city councils can vote to increase taxes, but townships cannot. It's the township residents that have to. I see Mr. Massey has his hand up.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
okay, I want to fully understand what you're saying.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask this question
Okay.
to
Ms. Salvati.
Miss Becky.
Okay.
Okay. So the police original millage was what? That the voters voted for. What was the original millage?
1 mil. It shows on that 4029, just in November of 19, they went to a vote of the people to restore the millage to 1 mil.
Okay.
So for the 19 millage, they got to collect on that full 1 mil. Now we're a year later, and you'll see they have to take the rollback. So they only enjoyed that 1 full mil for 1 year.
Okay.
And now the rollback has happened to that, and it's going to keep happening until these expire and they go to a vote of the people again.
Okay. Thank you.
And one thing to consider for the public too is that, you know, that we've had a shutdown obviously with our economy, and we're bracing ourselves for some economic impact to our budget because we receive funding from the state in form of shared revenue that's based on sales tax. That shared revenue helps pay for quite a few things here at the township in our operations. So what percentage of our budget that ends up being, none of us are sure of. Nobody has a crystal ball. They're saying it's not going to be quite as bad as what they'd originally predicted, but nobody knows until a few months from now when we actually get a check. So this would be about a 3% reduction, or no, not 3%, but $187,000 roughly in real dollars, Ms. Salvati?
173,000.
173. Okay. All right. Any other comments? We'll go to the public and see if they have any comments at this time. And if somebody wants to raise their hand, we will call on you. So, who? Okay, Joe Johnson, please.
Yep. Yeah. So, guys, I guess if you can quickly potentially, right? So I understand the rollback. That sounds like that's something that's instituted by the state. What is the intended purpose of the rollback? Is that because the state is essentially expecting that we are getting better at managing our operating expenses every year, and thereby we should be able to return a portion of that funding to the people?
Good question,
No,
Mr. Johnson.
I think they originally had the Headley rollback so that the more affluent communities wouldn't be able to capture more money than those that weren't affluent. As it turned out, now with the taxable value and everything that came in 94, anytime a house sells, it causes the rollback to kick in. We had 887 properties that transferred ownership last year, and I think we have at this point 467. So all of those properties are contributing to that rollback number, because they're going to make it so that collectively we don't collect money on all those uncappings. That's why they're rolling back the millage, so that we aren't collecting any more because of those uncapped properties.
So as a property sells, right, your sale price becomes essentially the basis for the new assessment, which raises the overall taxation base. Sale price was higher than the prior sale price of the property. Exactly.
Well, let's say that, somebody sells for 250, so they've got an assessment of 125.
Yep.
But
correct.
the prior owners had lived there for a long time, and their taxable value is 100,000. When that uncaps,
Yep.
your assessed value becomes your taxable value. So that starting point is 125,000.
Mr. Johnson, for the record.
Won't allow us to collect more than what the prior taxable value was and the cost of living.
Mr. Johnson, if you can.
That's why they're rolling back so that we don't capture the rest of that uncapping.
Mr. Johnson, if you can give us your address too for the record. I know Miss Lane is needing that.
Yeah, 5360 East Maple Avenue.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments. I see Mr. Ert has his hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Letter 7212 Porter Road. You know, I just want to hand it to the board and the previous boards for being able to operate on such a low millage rate. When you really go out there and look at other communities, they have a lot higher millage rates than we do. I just want to thank you for being able to operate and keep things going as well as they have been. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ert. Any other guests care to comment? You're going to raise your hand. Again, go down to the participants icon, click on that, go to the bottom right of the list of the participants, and you should see the bottom right corner a hand that you can click on to raise. Okay. I'm sorry? Oh. Okay, we don't see any other hands raised, so we will move on at this time, and we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Any other comments, Ms. Salvati?
I just want to say it's really a complicated issue, and if anybody wants to know more about the actual calculations and everything, they can call my office and set up an appointment with me. I don't have any problem with running through stuff so that people can truly understand what it is that goes into those calculations.
Okay.
So.
Thanks, Ms. Salvati. All right. Thank you. We will move on to the approval of our minutes at this time. Anybody care to make a motion with regard to the minutes?
So move.
Mr. Massey, would that be all of the minutes listed, or one in particular, or what have you?
All listed.
Okay. So that includes July 28th, August 5th, August 10th, August 11th, 13th, executive session from the 13th, and August 25th regular board meeting.
As I recall, Mr. Chair, July 28th was flagged for something, right?
Ms. Lane?
When we were meeting, the board members were able to read all of the executive minutes before they were sealed, and Mr. Mansour wanted to read some of the executive minutes. If you wanted to read them, you have to come into my office. They are not distributed. They're held by me privately, and if they're approved tonight, they're going to be sealed. Mr. Bennett has reviewed them and signed them, so we both reviewed and signed them, and if you approve the executive minutes tonight, they're going to be sealed and they're only opened under a circuit court order.
But I thought the board members were supposed to read them.
Only if you come in to do it.
You can come in to read them if you want.
Okay, I would like to exclude those then.
The executive committee meeting minutes? Or?
Yes.
Ms. Lane?
Chair,
Yep.
the board has, since the last meeting, has known that they could come into my office. I don't want to keep these things open and ongoing. I mean, if you want to read them, come in tomorrow, and let's get this done, rather than keep extending them for weeks at a time.
Okay, Clerk Lane,
Go ahead, Mr.
Can
Massey.
can we approve them tonight and I'll read them tomorrow?
Yes, sir, I'll hold them for you.
Okay.
I'll give anybody on the board until 5 o'clock tomorrow to come in and read them in my office. If you don't, I'm sealing them.
Mr. Laddie?
I understand the logistics of it, but if there a board member that can't vote for those because he hasn't had a chance to review them, and that board member can abstain from the vote, and the other members can approve them, that doesn't mean that he can't come in and see them. It would just mean that he wouldn't be voting on them. Otherwise, I think it would be odd for someone to vote on minutes that they haven't seen as far as.
Yeah. I don't have any problem holding them open, Miss Lane, if somebody wants to take a look at them. I know it's going to sit on your desk in an open, file, but if we want to hold off on the executive committee meeting minutes until everybody has a chance to read them, I don't have any issue with it. I don't know what the consensus of the board is. Has everybody reviewed them, or who?
No, I haven't. I haven't, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Guzak.
We should just make the motion that those 3 items are pulled from this approval, and let Joe come in this week and read them, and we can put them at the end of the month and get them approved. That way he's got a chance to read them, and if somebody else wants to read them, they can. It'll just be one last time.
Yeah. Mr. Mansour?
No, if that's an amendment to the motion to approve the minutes, I would second it.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
Who made the motion? Was it you, Miss Lane?
No, the original motion hasn't been supported, sir.
Who was that made the motion?
Mr. Massey made the motion to approve all of the listed minutes.
So, Mr. Massey,
there was no second.
Okay. Well, I think Mr. Mansour said he'll second it if Mr. Massey wants to change his motion or amend his motion to exclude the executive committee meeting minutes.
I move to exclude the executive amendment.
And Mr. Mansour?
Good.
Okay. Mr. Mansour supports it. So go ahead, Ms. Lane.
All right. Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Just raise your thumb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Adkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Chair?
Yes. Okay, so the first operational issue is the board will consider a resolution to approve a total authorized levy of 6.8738 mils for the tax year 2020, comprised of 4.4844 mils for township operating, 0.9960 mils for extra voted police, 0.1546 mils for extra voted mosquito, 0.9934 mils for extra voted fire, 0.2454 mil for extra voted parks and recreation. Mr. Laddie, was there any change to those? I know that I thought we.
You did. You're right. I did mention that there may be a change, but there is not. The resolution as submitted is good to go.
Okay. Ms. Lane?
So moved to adopt the resolution authorizing the levy of 6.8738 mils as presented.
Support.
You're supporting it, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
All right.
Any discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Adkins? Mr. Adkins?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Chair?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Item B, the board will consider a resolution to set a date for a public hearing to consider approval of the special assessment district role for the resurfacing of Grand Blanc Estate subdivision roads. Ms. Lane?
It's a standard resolution. Notices will be published in the newspaper, and I mail out the notices to the property owners. And I would move that this be approved with the addition of the appropriate Grand Blanc Estates public hearing is October the 27th at 7 p.m.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Massey supports. Any discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
All right. Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Item C, the board will consider a resolution to set a date for a public hearing to consider approval of the special assessment district role for the resurfacing of Grand Walea subdivision roads. I'll support that motion. Or make
You're
the
gonna
mo-
make the
I'll make-
motion,
I'll
I'll
make the
support
motion.
it then, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
I'll make the motion. Okay. Any discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
All right. Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Item D, the board will consider a resolution to set a date for the public hearing to consider approval of the special assessment district role for the resurfacing of Meadowlark Drive in the Granville Estates subdivision.
I'll support
Okay, you making the motion, Mr.
it.
Guzak?
Yes, I'll make the motion.
Okay,
And
supported
I'll
by Ms.
support.
Lane. Go ahead, Ms. Lane, unless there's discussion.
The date on that is October the 8th. I'm going to include the appropriate dates in the resolution in this motion, okay?
What was the one for Grand Walea?
I didn't have that one handy to throw it in there. It's September the 22nd, I think.
Okay. Mr. Atkins?
Maybe for Clerk Lane, what is the process again for that next step?
Again,
So-
the notices will be published in the paper, mailed to the property owners, and by that time, we should have the cost that will be assessed to the property owners for their project. We're doing this in order to be able to put their first year assessment on the December tax bill.
And if any residents were opposed to any of these projects, they still have an opportunity to have their voice heard, or is that?
Mr. Laddie?
So,
Let's let Mr. Laddie weigh in on that.
They do, and Clerk Lane is right about the notices and the letters. What that does is it lets everybody know what the costs, the best estimate of the costs are, including construction costs and administrative costs. And then at these hearings, we invite the public in and explain to them that what the costs are and that we've divided them by the whatever number of properties are in the district, and that they're going to have a period of time, and sometimes that varies depending on the scope of the project, but they'll have a period of time to extend these over a number of years to make payments. Now, if somebody wants to object, but by the way, all of these districts have already been created, and many of them are in the pipeline, either have been constructed or are in the pipeline to be constructed. And so if somebody wants to object to the amount of their assessment, they need to make an objection either in writing, could be emailed to the clerk's office or a letter to the clerk's office before the date of the public hearing, or they need to appear at the public hearing, and I think we're doing these by Zoom, so they need to be on the Zoom call, because you need to have voiced your objection to your assessment before the close of the public hearing, because if the roll is approved, then your next remedial step would be to file an appeal with the Michigan Tax Tribunal, which has to be done within the date of the approval of the tax roll. So to put it in casual terms, we're now into the cost phase of these assessments, and so the existence of the assessment has already been established. It's just whether or not you want to protest your amount to the tax tribunal. But you should also come, though, and if you're unhappy with us or have issues with the process, you should voice those. I would suggest you do it in writing before the hearing if you can. Otherwise, our supervisor will have a hard time with the switchboard if it lights up with folks that want to make comments. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And actually, I still get complaints even after the public hearing, so. Ms. Lane?
I just wanted to ask Mr. Laddie, after their public hearing date, would you state again, because I missed it, how many days they have to appeal to the tax tribunal?
30 days.
Thank you.
That's the state tax tribunal?
Correct.
Okay. All right, Ms. Lane, I think we were in the middle of voting on that one, were we? Or?
We hadn't started, we were having discussion.
Okay.
This is on Meadowlark Drive, gentlemen.
Right.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yeah.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay, item E, the board will consider a resolution to set a date for the public hearing to consider approval of the special assessment district role for the resurfacing of Thrush Drive and Robin Drive in the Granville Estate subdivision.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, supported by Mr. Massey. What was the date of that one, Miss Lane?
October the 8th, because, again, Meadowlark, Thrush, and Robin are going to be combined because they're in the same subdivision, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
But because they were brought in separately, we
Right.
have to handle this separately.
Yep. Any discussion? Go ahead, Miss Lane.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. We can bring Patrick on, Mr. Linehan. Okay, item F, the board will consider a motion to have Rowe Engineering, I'm not sure, PCS, modify the previous contract bid to include renovating the lower quad of the baseball fields at the park, Bicentennial Park, at a price of $186,378 and award the work to Water Management Specialist, Inc. This item will be paid from the park's millage and be awarded from that, I guess. We have Mr. Linehan, our Parks Director, with us at the meeting here. Mr. Mansour had a couple of questions, Mr. Linehan, at the last meeting. If you can go ahead and reply to those.
Yeah, so I'd like to apologize. I was sick on Tuesday and wasn't at work, so I wasn't feeling well. So let me read to you initially what we had put, and then I'll answer some of the questions. In 2019, Grand Blanc Township, working with Rowe Professional Services and Water Management Specialists, renovated the upper quad softball fields at Bicentennial Park. The updates to the fields have brought new interest into running the facilities for games and tournaments, bringing in the most tournaments in 2020 that the park has seen. One of the common questions that we were asked is, when will you be renovating the lower quad, which is fields 7 through 10? When the upper quad was bid out last year, only 2 bids were received and only one water management specialist was considered the qualified bidder. Working with Mr. Rector, the owner of Water Management Specialist, his company was impressed both Rowe and the township with his knowledge, passion, and skill for the project. Because of his knowledge, he saved the township $40,000 from the initial bid due to this knowledge. With the lack of qualified bidders in 2019 and the desire to complete the project this fall, I'm requesting that we modify the previous contract to include renovating the lower quad at the price of $186,378, which will be paid for by the park millage and done by Water Management Specialist. So with COVID and that right now, when you can get a contractor in and get working, that you kind of need to jump on it. He does have some availability this fall. We would like to complete the project this fall. We will have some scheduling conflicts, but what we'll do is we'll renovate one field at a time. Knowing this is Michigan and the weather is completely unpredictable, we would hope to get it done this fall, but the project, could possibly go into the spring. But again, it should be minimal impact on our scheduling.
So Patrick, one of the questions was regarding the cost and where we're at with the parks millage.
Right. So the Parks millage is all of our capital. Well, right now at this time, we're getting things lined up for some other projects and getting supplies for projects that our park staff are going to be completing in the off season. We haven't spent a large amount of the millage, so this project right here will completely come out of the Parks millage. We also have a fund balance from the Parks millage last year that we can get into.
Mr. Mansour?
Yep, so that was really the question. Based on the last budget report we received, it looks like there was around $409,000 has to be spent in the Parks and Rec. And I just wanted to know if we spent this $186,000, if that was going to be sufficient for the balance of the year to operate the parks.
Right. So whatever we spend out of the Parks millage, we can't use to operate the park.
Okay.
With the way that the park millage is written. We also haven't quite seen the whole park millage settle yet, so we'll still have some of that money coming in.
Thank you.
Recently, as far as operating goes, we have cut back drastically on what we would normally be spending. So we've tightened our belt and tried to live within our means per se. When rentals stop and that, we'll get a little bit tighter, but for the most part right now, we're running under what we're bringing in. So, we should be good for right now.
Well, it's been a very difficult year. I mean, with everything being canceled, and not us necessarily wanting to cancel it, but the health department. I think Mr. Mansour also had a question in terms of the bidding on this project.
Yeah.
If you can speak to that a little bit.
Originally, for the project, there were only two bidders. Water management specialist was the only qualified bidder. The other one didn't have any experience in doing this sort of project. Water management specialist, they've done fields at MSU, Grand Valley State, Lawrence Tech, a lot of local, Michigan high schools. They even did a drainage system at Warwick Hills. So this is their bread and butter. This is all that they do, is field work.
So this is
part of the project. The infields are going to be stripped down to 2 inches. The lips for the grass, where we've had encroachment over the years, that's going to get stripped back and edged. We're going to install 2.5 inches of the Washington Ball infield mix, and it's going to be GPS graded out there. And then we're going to put in clay bricks and mound clay around the pitching mound and the batter's box. And we're actually going to add a little bit more to the ones that were done last year because we found that some of the pitchers were actually going out further than what we thought they would do. That includes resodding. The price also includes the tarps for the pitcher mound and batter boxes, which helps keep the clay moist, setting the bases, and mobilization.
Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Pat. Mr. Pat, my question is, my past experience has been, if you have a procedure where you're supposed to send something out for bid, and once you choose whatever you want, or whatever you like, then you modify the existing bid. I thought you're supposed to go back for quotes again.
Well, and this is why it came to the board. It was suggested by Roe to open up the contract and reissue it if at all possible. But we certainly can rebid it. At this point, it will probably be next spring. But that's not a problem.
So, Mr. Atkins, you need to unmute your line there, Mr. Atkins.
think the timing is right, and I think that's what the money's there for. The fields really are, a big part of the heart and soul of that park out there. So I make the motion to approve what's presented.
Okay, Miss
Chair.
Lane? I'm sorry, Miss Lane?
I would like to support that, Mr. Chair, and
Okay.
for clarification to Mr. Mathey, there are times when many of, or several of our departments will come and say that there is only one qualified single source provider, and recognizing that, we would go with someone that has been doing quality work rather than spending the time and the money to bid. So from what Director Linehan has said, I would list this company as a single source provider that's experienced and would be the reason we would not go out and spend time looking for bids.
Yeah, it's a highly specialized field, no pun intended. Mr. Thomas?
Through you, Chairman Bennett, to Director Linehan, if that's okay.
Yes.
Director Linehan, there will be not any new wells for this project, correct?
No. Nope.
Okay, where is the water which well does that water come from?
There is no irrigation on those fields. We do have a spigot down there at each quad that is fed off municipal water.
Yeah. So eventually,
I'm sorry, where? It's not fed off municipal water.
There are two drinking fountains at both the upper and lower quad that is fed by municipal water. There's no irrigation out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, all right, thank you.
yeah. But maybe a future project is to look at irrigation for those fields, but right now we're just trying to bring them up to speed. So we've got a motion that's been supported. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item, item G, the board will consider a motion to extend department directors' employment agreements to January 31st, 2021. This, in motion anyways, that I put on the agenda, this includes the DPW, finance, assessing, and IT directors. Let me give a little bit of background. So I have a printout from our HR generalist of the dates that the contract started and the contracts ended for each of our department directors. So the four that I named on the agenda, their contracts are all expiring before the end of our term as trustees on this board. So for example, our assessing director, the contract started in 2017, September 15th of 2020 is when it expires. The GIS IT director position expires on the 24th of this month. The DPW director expires on October 1st of this year. The finance director expires on November 5th of this year.
Wow.
So all of those expire before the end of our term. All I'm asking is that we extend those till January 31st, so that the new board is able to get their feet on the ground before they start negotiating those contracts. I know Clerk Lane had approached me about making all of the contracts expire at the same time, and I think that would be very difficult for any board to be looking at all of those, and plus I wouldn't want to have all those contracts come up all at one time in the event that we have everybody looking for other positions at the same time. But let me go through what the other dates are for the other departments. So those four listed all expire either September 15th, September 24th, October 1st, and November 5th. The planning and building director expires January 1st of 2021, so well into the start of the next board's term. The fire chief, that position contract doesn't expire until 2022. The police chief doesn't expire until 2022. Parks and Rec director doesn't expire until 2023. And that's it for the department. So I know that Mr. Guzak is saying why not throw in, I think he said building planning director. His actually doesn't expire now till January 1st. So, you know, the new board starts November 20th. So what I included in the motion was the 4 that are expiring during our term. Mr. Guzak?
I'd like to amend that so that we have the planning and building expire on January 31st instead of January 1st. So you're talking 30 days to make it fair to everyone. And the contracts I had before, I guess you had new ones. So I'm glad that the fire department, the chief of fire department and the chief of police has been extended because our records didn't show that. So I'm glad that's cleared up. I was really concerned about that because our clerk did not have those records because no one gave them to her.
Well,
So
I would not assume that she was not given them. I'm not sure what evidence you have of that, but.
Well, I went over there and asked her and pulled up her file, and I've got a copy of the document that was in her book.
Well, that doesn't indicate that we did not give her a copy. That indicates she does not have a copy.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well that's fine.
I do not want to besmirch anybody for her not having a copy, and they weren't updated without this board knowing about it. So.
Well, as soon as they're updated, she should have a copy. She shouldn't
I agree.
have to ask for anything.
Well, it wasn't updated. It came before the board.
I know, but once the board is, we don't have the contracts. You guys have the contracts. You didn't give it to the clerk.
The board reviews those. We voted on it.
Yes, they did review it, but the actual copy that I wanted to look at was not in the file because it was never given to her.
I believe it probably has her signature on each of them as well. Mr. Atkins?
Well, I got the amendment to put that on there, so I don't know if there's a second or not. So.
Well, let's hear from everybody first, and then we can go there. Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, 2 questions. One, this is non-union employees, correct?
Correct.
And then maybe this question would be for Mr. Laddie, but just curious, I'm sure it's always been this way, but what is the advantage of having non-union personnel, directors of departments, have a contract that expires?
Directors typically have contracts because they're in more of a policy-making role and a supervisory role in municipal government, and it's very common to have a department head or director have an individual contract with a beginning date and an end date, and also any other clauses that you find in there. You also find in most of our contracts description of duties. And things of that nature. There may be nuances to retirement issues that are relevant to individual employees. Generally, though, the thought is that you want to have your leaders subject to individual contracts themselves, and you want them to have beginning and end dates because you want to make your policies flexible as far as who carries those out.
Okay.
David, Mr. Laddie, at one time, were these union positions?
You know, some of them, I think many of them were. I know, for example, I think, well, we used to have an executive union where we'd have department heads in that union, and we spent many years trying to rearrange that union into these individual contracts. It allows much more flexibility for the employer moving forward. And so, Supervisor Bennett, you're right. I think most of these folks were subject to collective bargaining agreements in the past, and that was a very bad policy that we worked very hard to eliminate.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of, timing of these, we've never had them all expire at the same time just because it's, we need to meet with each of these individuals, and it isn't a cookie cutter type thing. There's certain things, expectations and reviewing and what have you that goes into this. Is that correct, Mr. Laddie, from your experience?
No, I agree. Well, just from a practical standpoint, it'd be hard to get everybody going at the same time. You got you have performance reviews, you have contract terms that may need to be amended. You also don't want to have everybody up at the same time, potentially considering other opportunities and things of that nature. You want to try to stagger these things out if you can.
Mr. Atkins, then Ms. Lane.
Sorry, one more question. And are the length of these contracts all the same? Is this a yearly or
3 years?
We try three. We find, I don't know what the magic of 3 years is, but that we've settled on. Maybe it's exactly for the purpose of creating a contract that won't overlap if there's administrative differences and changes in philosophy.
Okay, the next question, Mr. Mansur, or Mr. Atkins?
yes?
Okay, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, I want to, for consistency, since you have the police, the fire, and Parks and Rec staggered, I'm going to support Mr. Guzak's motion so that the planning director has the same expiration date, so that the board can address the future board can address them in whatever fashion they want to, but at least they know they have until January 31st to work out those changes. We didn't have time to even address individual paid for these people during this COVID time.
Right. I don't have any problem with it. I'm just saying it's not a matter of fairness. I mean, we're not being unfair by saying, hey, we're going to stick with the original contract. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, the new board has the opportunity to negotiate these. So if you want to...
I have no problem with that, but I want to be consistent since everybody else has the January 31st and the others that you mentioned are extended far out. I simply think it's better for consistency.
Well, I don't have any issue with it. If that is what everybody wants to do, go that route. But I don't. I also see some value to staggering them too. But we can go with all of them expiry. Any other input, Mr. Mansur?
Yeah, so I see that these are staggered a little bit, but what I think what we're proposing to do with this motion is basically to stack all 4 of them, maybe 5 of them on top of each other.
Right.
Right. That's kind of what we're proposing here. So I guess it's not really that big of a deal.
Yep.
To actually not have a bunch of them put on top of each other.
Yeah.
And then I guess the only other comment I had here was, have we talked with the individual department directors, and are they would they be amenable to this?
Yes, I've spoken with all of them. I haven't spoke with our planning building director because you know, I wasn't proposing since his doesn't come up for till the beginning of the year. But I would guess that he'd be okay with us extending it by 30 days.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Atkins.
Just one more thing, just for some clarity on my part, is so there's 2 things with the employees, right? There's the performance evaluation. Is that separate from the contract, or is the contract also a time to negotiate compensation when that director is doing their one-on-one? Are those separate things, or is that an opportunity both ways?
Well, it's really an operational issue, and Mr. Laddie, you want to weigh in, but I believe, you know, the performance evaluation weighs in on where you go with the evaluation or the continuation of the contract. So, Mr. Laddie, any comments from your experience? Okay. So it does weigh in on it, and it does weigh in on negotiation of the future wages and you know, their tenure. So we have a motion by Mr. Guzak, supported by Ms. Lane. Any other discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Okay. Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Mansur?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Guzak.
I was unmuted. You must have put me back.
Okay. You're unmuted.
Yes, yes.
I'm yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. Letter H, the board will discuss a union grievance filed as a result of a board of trustees members' interaction with staff. We discussed it on Tuesday. I'm not sure if anybody needs any information with regard to that, but I think we discussed it fully on Tuesday. Anybody have any questions with regard to that? I'm sorry, Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, so, I mean, we discussed a top level of this, but I don't have any specifics around this agreement. Don't understand exactly, the specifics about who made it, what the conditions are, et cetera.
Right.
So,
Yep. Well, so I can tell you this. We can send those out to the board, the detailed reports for what transpired. We have actually had several FOIAs come in for those reports, but we can share them with the board if you would like them.
Thank you. I think at the last meeting you indicated there was nothing necessarily confidential about them.
Right.
So I guess I would like to understand those as a prelude to understanding what kind of policy, if any, would be useful.
And at the time of Tuesday's meeting, I wasn't quite sure on what information had to be redacted. Since then, we've clarified what information, if it needed to be redacted, and we found out it didn't. So we'll be glad to email it out to all the board members if everybody would like a copy of it.
Yes, please.
Okay. And in terms of the next agenda item, in terms of the policies that we might develop from it, I've asked our labor attorney to start roughly drafting some out to give us a rough draft, and we don't have to settle on that till everybody has a good look at what the grievances were, and then we can look at whether the policy would fit. But okay. All right. Item J, the board will consider a motion to refund $13,058 to Wayne McIntyre and Rachel Gupel for the completion of a fire bond. Mr. Mansour?
I make that motion.
Okay. Ms. Lane?
Support.
Okay. Any discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. In terms of future agenda items, we do have the water rate study that will be ready at the beginning of this next month for our first board meeting, so we will bring that up. In terms of the road policy, actually part of our committee met today, Ms. Lane, Mr. Massey, myself, and discussed where we're going next. We actually are scheduling a meeting next week. We hope to have the road commission. We'd like Mr. Laddie to be present, also row engineering, and we're going to discuss our options with regard to private streets and the financing of those. So those two agenda items will be coming up shortly. After the committee on the roads, we're going to have to do some homework on that, and that's what we're doing with the road commission and with row engineering before we come up with any recommendations for the board. Anything else on future agenda items before we go into? I'll give my report on the staffing in just a moment if that's what you're bringing up, Mr.
No,
okay.
This is different.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to bring this up. First of all, I only have 2 cashiers, okay, and 1 deputy. And right now, I currently have no cashiers, okay. I'm using help from different departments, and of course, then the clerk's department has been helping a lot. But because of all the activity that's going on with the election, they're not going to be able to help as much. And so we've got some things in the works. But I'd like to suggest that this department shuts down between 12 and 1 o'clock for lunch so that they can actually have a regular lunch. Because right now, some of them are working through lunches, the people that I have. And here again, I have no full-time people. And in the past, you always had at least 2 people there. So 1 person would rotate down lunch. And that means my deputy would actually fill in so that the other clerks go through. Well, now there's no full-time people there. They're just people that, luckily, they've been trained by us, and they were in this department previously, so they're very experienced. But we cannot have it where 1 person's there. So I'm thinking that if we had a lunch break, that way they don't have to work through lunches, because sometimes they do work through lunches. They get paid overtime, but that's very stressful to go from now till December and not be able to get out of the building after 9 hours.
I'm going to bring up the staffing issue under my report, Mr. Guzak, so I'll address.
I'm suggesting that we have a break from 12 to 1 where we do not, my department is not open.
Yeah, we can take a look at doing that. Any future agenda items that we didn't mention, and I'll bring up the staffing under my report and what we're doing on that. Okay, let's go to some of the board reports. Mr. Mansour, anything with regard to Metro Alliance or the
Planning Commission, yeah.
Planning Commission?
So Metro Alliance, just a short meeting last, last month. Another number 10 amendment to the TIP program. There wasn't anything specific to the township in that, so nothing there. The other part of this is the Planning Commission. So in the packet, there was a request from Mr. Lloyd in his report to include a review and I guess ultimately a motion to release the master plan draft to the public. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say that the steering committee, the planning committee, all the individuals have had opportunity to weigh into that, have input, and it's ready to move forward here. So I would like to make sure that that topic is on the agenda for our September 22nd meeting. Mm-hmm. And again, have Mr. Lloyd come in, do a review of the draft, and with the ultimate goal here of having the Board of Trustees adopt the draft for release to the public.
Yeah, we've got it on the agenda for the 4th Tuesday of this month. So
thank you.
The board, your planning commission approved it on last Thursday, and our agenda
the 3rd
was ready to go out on Thursday. So, anyways, we have Parks and Rec, Zoning Board of Appeals. Anything, Mr. Atkins, on ZBA?
We're meeting next week. Nothing to report tonight.
Okay. Anything, Mr. Guzak, with regard to treasurer other than the staffing that I'll cover in just a moment and what we're doing?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we close the office between 12 and 1 until I can come back and have 2 full-time cashiers.
Yeah.
I'll support that.
Yeah. I think it's an operational issue, but and we can look at that. But Mr. Massey, go ahead.
I understand what the treasurer is saying, but I have a concern, and I'd like for someone to address this concern. You have residents have been coming in even at 12.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So how do you address that issue with the residents?
Yeah.
Now they're going to become irritated because now they leave their jobs to come in to pay their utility bills or whatever, and now the office is closed.
Right.
So how do we address that?
Well, we have to
hold on, Mr. Guzak, I'll respond, and we'll give you plenty of opportunity to speak again. However, with regard to staffing, as I said, we will cover that when we get to that under my report. As far as closing the office, staffing the office, what have you, falls under day-to-day operations. And that is under my guidance at this time. And if we want to wait till I give a report, I can fill you in on what we're doing to cover that topic. Mr. Mansour?
Just would appreciate during your report to have a little bit of background about what's happened here over the past whatever time frame to create this lack of personnel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll pull my support so we can hear the details.
All right. Thanks. Mr. Guzak?
Yes, I requested a part-time person way before my first person.
We're going to get into that in just a moment. Okay. Mr. Thomas? Need to unmute your line, Mr. Thomas. We can't hear you.
So,
if this is with regard to staffing, I'd appreciate waiting.
Supervisor, what I'd like to, but I understand that you're going to go over the operations. I agree with you that it is an operations issue, but would you please allow Treasurer Guzak time to bring his motion up during your staffing report, after your staffing report?
I'll allow Mr. Guzak to speak, but in terms of closing the office, I think that's an operational issue, not a board issue. Miss Lane?
The clerk's office is busy, busy, busy. We've got 10,080 ballots. We don't applications in that we have to process. They're coming in daily. We don't have ballots yet. We'll have them in early October, and I'm asking for, we'll start sending them out as soon as we can, and people can start calling after October the 10th and see where their ballots are, because there's no way in one day are we ever going to get 10,000 stuffed and recorded. So after October the 10th, if people want to know where their ballot is, we'll be able to say it's been mailed, we're working on it, or we haven't gotten to your precinct yet, so that we replace some of the lengthy phone calls that I'm taking every day. Anybody that needs to register to vote, please come into the office now. I prefer that you not wait, even though the law allows it, until 8 p.m. the day of the election. Be more responsible and thoughtful of my staff so that we can get it done. Mm-hmm. We're also encouraging anybody that has applications to put them in the tan mailbox out in the parking lot. It's next to the blue mailbox for the federal mailing, to eliminate people coming into the office and quickly being able to take care of it. If you put it in the tan mailbox, if you put your ballot when you sign the envelope and put it in the tan mailbox, you're avoiding any difficulty with the postal service, and you are making sure that we in the township have received it. And if there are still some individuals that want to work on election day, we're glad to have you fill out applications. There won't be any training until the end of September or the early part of October. But we are buried in phone calls and paperwork right now. Multiple nonprofits have been sending out applications for registration and applications for absentee ballots. And in some cases, it's a double, because residents don't remember if they filled those forms out. So we're getting duplicates, triplicates, and each one of those has to be processed, so we make sure. So I would hope that some of these groups realize that there's only so many hours in the day, and they're not helping the process, they're bogging it down. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And we're going to make a concerted effort to promote that drop box in the drive-through on social media here, also working on that right now, but we have promoted it in the past.
So we've been doing it faithfully for weeks, months now, so thank you. Yep.
With regard to staffing.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Massey.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Clerk Lane.
Okay.
Certainly.
Hey, can you guys close the door?
What process do you have in place to check after you mail out the ballots that those ballots have ample time, based on things that are going on with the post office, that they have received their ballots? I mean, what checking mechanism that you will have in place?
When we start mailing them out and people call and say, where is our ballot? We'll be able to tell them what date we mailed them. And then, as what happened in the primary, the post office lost some of the trays, and then people that didn't get their ballot have to come in, fill out the audit slip that the state requires, and we hand them another ballot. So I simply want people's patience to know we'll get out those 10,000 ballots as quickly as we can, and if they have waited a reasonable length of time and haven't gotten them, they'll have to come in, fill out the audit form, and then we'll have to break away from what we're doing and issue them a ballot and hand it to them so they can take it home and vote it. There's no way for us to know when the mail has been lost.
Let me ask you a question. I don't know whether this is illegal. It's just a thought. If you sent out what I call a random sample for different areas. Say you sent out 100 random samples in different areas throughout the township. You could use that as a checking point to determine, okay, in X area, they did receive somebody that you know that you'll be sending it to, did receive that check mechanism that's put in place.
Mr. Massey, there is no way to guarantee that the post office gets all the mail to everybody, even with the yellow applications for our permanent AB mailing list. Children, husbands and wives that had them mailed at exactly the same time, and we're talking thousands, will call here and say, my son got his, my husband got his, but I didn't get mine. And all we can ask them to do, because it does happen, I'll say, wait a few days. If you don't get yours because it was mailed at the same time, call back and we'll send you another one. That's the only thing we can do. There's no other solution. And it's all this effort to get people to vote is wonderful, but we need more patience, because we can't have 10,000 people walking in here looking for their absentee ballots. They need to be patient and get it, and we're going to do it as quickly as we can. But as is in the primary, they're working late into night. We're working on weekends, and we will get them out as quickly as we can so that people have time to vote them. And then, as Supervisor Bennett and everybody in this office knows, rather than put them in the mail, you can bring them to the township hall, use the drop box outside, which we empty every day, and we come in with boxes of applications overflowing. That's the best way to guarantee that we get them here to the township. But I will tell all of you and remind you, we cannot accept any ballots to be counted until 8 p.m. on the night of the election, okay? If your ballot comes in because you mailed it on Friday, and this is Tuesday night, and it doesn't get here by Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, and we check the post office, we check the drop boxes, you've lost your vote. So when you get your ballot, take several days to look at it, use the drop box so that you know the township has it, so that we can count your ballots. And the AB counting boards that I increased to 5, anticipating this increase, we increased, remember, our AB counting boards from 2 until 5. They will start opening the ballots at 7 a.m. on election day. And it took until midnight to get all of the primary ballots counted, but my team of election workers will do the same thing. It will not be taking days for us to process them. It will take hours, and the AB counting board is sequestered from beginning to end in the old gym of the Grand Blanc High School.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lane. So just to clarify, Ms. Lane, in terms of when somebody does come in to turn in an absentee ballot, you have your staff that accepts those and make sure that they've signed it or what have you, correct?
Correct. If we get any in the mail or in the drop box that have not been signed, then that's one of the reasons why on the applications we're asking for phone numbers or emails, because we've sent out letters. I think we had roughly 10 that we got that in the primary. 10 people who we tried calling and sending letters saying you didn't sign your ballot envelope. They never came back in to sign it, so those 10 people's votes never counted.
But what I'm trying to clarify, is it's your staff that accepts those ballots, right?
Well, it's been the finance and the clerk's department that have worked together through all of this.
Right, but I did receive an email from you though that said that I think you're going to stop sharing your staff with the treasurer's office, and they're going to accept the ballots, and that's pretty much it, right?
we are both very busy, and we don't have time to, we have only one person that can operate the finance machines, and that's my deputy, and she can't do it and do her
Right.
work.
So I just want to clarify though,
The other workers can't do it.
So your people are going to do the election work, and the cashiers are going to take care of the treasurer work.
Right.
Right,
But
okay.
of all of my workers, only the deputy knows how to operate the receiving machines.
Right.
None of the other
Right.
people have any
Yep,
training.
that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. So with regard to staffing, I just want to make clear that. Go ahead, Mr. Guzak. You need to unmute yourself.
You locked me out again.
No, I didn't. You got to unmute yourself.
I did.
I haven't touched
I
it.
did. Am I okay now?
We can hear you.
Well, yeah, I did it every time, but you keep locking me out.
I have not
Anyway,
touched it.
We do, they come up and they accept ballots, because a lot of times, so we do take some ballots and then the clerk has to pick them up. So we are still taking ballots for them, even though they can't assist us in the other part, we are still doing that part.
Okay. With regard to staffing, I believe, Mr. Guzak, with regard to your budget, we're already quite a bit over budget with regard to staffing for the finance department, right?
No, the only reason we're over budget was
be
because
careful
they did
on-
not put in
Yeah.
the amount for the PFM investment, okay? That's the only reason we're over.
No, I thought on the staffing area we're over.
No, there's only two. I have two cashiers and one deputy.
Yeah,
Previously, I
yeah.
had three cashiers.
right. I don't want to get into anything that would violate HIPAA or any type of personnel issues with regard to this discussion. But I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't get us into trouble in those areas. But we have a staffing issue with regard to people being able to work in that department, number one, because I think Mr. Guzak will tell you that they have to have certain skills that he wants to make sure they have before they start accepting payments, what have you. But unfortunately, we have two people that are out right now, and in terms of trying to find other people to staff it, we've pulled people from other departments. We have also arranged, Chief Wiles, we met this past week, and I know Mr. Guzak's aware of this, that starting next week, we actually have one of the, I think you're aware of it, that we're bringing over somebody from the police department, actually from the dispatch, that's going to work up there 3 days a week starting next week. And we had somebody else also that, I'm sorry, Mr. Guzak?
Actually, the person that's coming over from the police department will be over here for just a few minutes, just a little bit of time. They actually don't start until the following week, which is September 22nd. That was the last email that I received.
Okay. I was of the understanding it was next week, actually, that they start.
No, it's not.
Okay, we'll clarify that, but I got a message. I got a message. I got a message while I'm sitting here that it's next week. But anyways, the other thing that we're going to do is I've asked our HR specialist to go ahead and let's try and find somebody part-time. The other issue we have is, with the union, we can't just, move people from one area to the other without some approvals there too. So we have a couple of things working against us with moving people into that department. One is that Mr. Guzak wants them to be qualified, what have you. And so if they aren't trained on that, we talked about a few weeks back that, there's going to be some time devoted to bringing them up to speed, which at this point with several people out in that department, we're going to have to commit some resources to training somebody because it's only going to get busier. What's led to this? Well, the volume of absentee ballots for one thing. Obviously, we haven't had an increase in people wanting to pay their taxes or what have you. So that hasn't changed. But in terms of volume of people coming in to drop off or pick up applications for absentee ballots has certainly increased. So we have tried bringing other people in from other departments, and we are doing that. We've taken an individual from the DPW and brought them over there, or from the building and planning. So we are moving people around, and we are going to try and find somebody to hire part-time. It's very difficult to hire people right now for whatever reason. We have a couple of positions that I think very few, if any, have applied for, but we're working on that. In terms of closing the office, I agree with Mr. Massey that somehow we got to find a way. I mean, right now we're open 8 to 5, and not everybody has a schedule that allows them to be in this area between those hours to get here. And when they do, I just hate for people to walk in and say, well, you're going to have to come back because we're closed for this hour. We have to find some kind of way, and I'm committed to doing that. So tomorrow, if you want, Mr. Guzak, we'll sit down in the morning, and we'll get the other department heads that are here and make sure that we figure out a way to cover it like we did up until just recently when we had another issue with somebody else not being able to be here. Go ahead, Mr. Guzak.
Yes, I requested the person out of DPW because she actually worked for me, okay? And I requested the person out of code enforcement because she worked for me. So I knew that. I requested it a while back, but now we've lost 2 cashiers, okay? I tried to get a part-time person. I was denied. Mm-hmm. So that, and I knew this was going to happen because you got elections, you got all this stuff going on. I was denied to have a part-time person. And so we tried to work through it, but now we've got 2 people that are not here, and both of them are cashiers. So I can't use the one from DPW because she's already been pre-trained. I can't use the one from code enforcement. She's pre-trained, and I've talked to department heads, like you said, and they're willing to help. But when they go on vacation, those people have to have their vacation. Well, my person, I've got one person left now. When she wants to go on vacation, she has to go. We can't deny her a vacation. And of course, I've got a dedicated staff, and so a lot of them have actually canceled their vacations in the past and worked it to get things done. Well, now there's only one person left, and that's why I'm suggesting. I know it's hard, but there's other places that closed down. That if you go down to the county, they're closed down. They're not even open on Fridays. They closed their office, and we've got drop boxes, and maybe we can shift the time. Instead of 12 to 1, we can go from 12:30 to 1 or whatever. But we can't have people working continuously, working through lunches. That's what we've been doing. And so I'm just trying to make it fair to the people that they don't have to come in here and work 9 hours and try to eat in between everything and give the quality service that we need. Because now you've got one person that's going to do the drive-through, that's going to answer the phones, and it's going to actually try to document the stuff. And then, well, they don't have time to eat. They don't have time for a break. They don't have time for anything. I know it's hard, and they've not complained about it. They didn't want me to say anything.
Okay.
I did this on my own because I can see it's stressful. It's stressful on me, and I've been helping out. I couldn't even get the payroll done because I was going to the drive-thru to pick up ballots to take them over so they could put the item into there and get it corrected and take it back to the person in the drive-thru because they got people lined up out the door. So I've been working a lot, and I'll do that, but they need to be able to take a lunch. And right now it's been very difficult. That's all I'm asking for. We got to figure out a way that they can take a lunch and not have to worry about it. And then they're not even taking their breaks, which everybody else can take their breaks. My girls can't.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mansur had his hand up first, I believe, and then we'll go to Mr. Atkins and then Ms. Lane.
Thank you. So it sounds to me that there's 2 people that were missing out of the group, and it's causing this stress here. And I guess you've mentioned that there's some circumstances around this, but are we knowledgeable enough to know if we have a 1-week problem or a 2-month problem or a 3-month problem? So because the answers would be different.
Right.
Depending on what we
exactly.
thought about that.
And that's why I'm suggesting we hire somebody additionally. And the other thing is the chief did commit one of his dispatch officers to working over here as well 3 days a week. which I would think would help alleviate some of that, Mr. Mansour.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I the other day I said this is not going to go away in a week or two. This is going to be something long term that we need to figure out, and we need to have, part of it is we have to work with the union on having part-time people here too, and doing some of these jobs. So, Mr. Atkins had his hand up, and then we'll go to Miss Lane, Mr. Massey, and then Mr. Guzak.
Two questions. The cashiers are union, correct?
Yes.
Well, I think Mr. Guzak, maybe to help Mr. Guzak with some of his issues, if they're working through lunch and everything, I'm surprised they haven't filed some grievances.
Well, they haven't yet, but
that's not fair.
Yeah. Okay, Miss Lane, and then Mr. Massey.
Employees working through lunch hours includes my election staff as well. And that's why today my deputy said, I can't keep doing this. And she's the only one of my staff that is trained to use the cashiers. Here's one of the things that, right now we have 5,000 payments a month that come through for finance. We've got summer taxes that are due on September 14th, and people are coming in to make sure they don't get any late payments. But and then we've got the elections going on. The elections won't be cleaned up until after November the 4th, because there's a lot of cleanup the public isn't aware of. And then already you're into December 1st, and that's the winter tax bills for the Treasurer's Department. So this is a problem from now until the end of February. And it's, I think it personally, when the DPW needed somebody, they took someone from the finance department, Mr. Guzak's department, and then all of a sudden they needed to keep that person. And in doing that, they have shorted his department and made it easier for other departments. So that's what's happened in the past, is they take from the finance, from Mr. Guzak's department, thinking that, they don't work very hard.
Well, let's look at solutions instead of looking at, what caused this and whatever. The bottom line is we've got to cover it.
That's going to go till February 28th.
Right. That's going to be something long term, and that's why I've said we need to hire somebody. So that's the route I'm going. I think in the short term, bringing in somebody from the police department in terms of helping the cashier position, and I think we sit down and figure out. I mean, we can't pull anybody from any other department right now other than what we've done. We've taken Amy from the building planning, and we're putting her over there. There's really, we have Yvonne back in our finance that she's come up. I don't know, other short of what we're doing, I don't know what else we do. I said we're trying to hire somebody. Mr. Massey had his hand up, and then we'll go to Mr. Guzak.
Mr. Supervisor.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I want to say, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Sure.
Can I call you tomorrow? Will you be available for a telephone conversation with me tomorrow about, say, 10 or 11, whenever you're available?
I've got a couple of meetings, but text me after this meeting. I can give you some times that I'd be available.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Guzak, and then Mr. Thomas. Mr. Guzak?
Oh, okay. I just wanted to thank, and I thought I'd thank before, but I wanted to thank the DPW department for letting me bring her, and also the code enforcement for letting them use him. And then also point out, we know one person won't come back until December. The other one might not last that long. We don't know. But the issue is, I've been trying for over a year to get one. I'm glad you're finally deciding that we can get somebody. But there's vacations that are going to occur. We'll just have to work around it because they have to be trained. So luckily we've got 2 people we pulled on. That's the ones we asked for because we knew they could help immediately. And Yvonne can't help because she's in a different union. I understand that. She only did that as an emergency because there was nobody here when we had a situation. So we understand all the ins and outs. We're just glad that you're finally realizing that we need to hire somebody like we should have done a long time ago.
Well, we're gonna have to make some changes in budget to accommodate for it. But Mr. Thomas,
If you do end up closing for a lunch break, please don't do it between 12 and 1. 12 and 1 is where most business people take off, and then that would be the time that they would come and use the facility at the township hall.
Yeah.
Staggered
Well,
between
yeah.
1 and 2, 2 and 3.
well, that's going to be a last resort for me to close the office. I want to do everything we can before we get to that point. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, my suggestion is you might be looking for somebody part-time, but I think in reality, the treasurer's office needs a full-time person in order to allow for not only lunch times, but vacation times. My kudos to the deputy treasurer. She came in on a day when she was trying to get a vacation day in order to fill in, and she has a planned vacation out of state that she deserves to take. And I just think the treasurer's department needs another full-time person, so even when the other two are back and working full-time, it can function properly.
Okay. I will meet with Mr. Guzak as soon as possible, along with our HR generalist, and take a look along with other department directors and see who we can pull for the next week, and see if the police dispatch person is going to help, or if we need more help immediately. But we're not going to be able to hire somebody in a couple of days. It's going to take a few weeks, but this isn't going to slow down anytime soon either. Mr. Guzak?
Yes, I already have the schedule of when we're going to get the person from the police, and
Okay.
I've already got the schedule of when the other two girls, one coming from DPW.
Okay.
Like I said before, DPW and code enforcement are very, very helpful. We already know their schedule. It's just
Okay.
when they go on vacation, and we know what the police department can give us, because I got that schedule, which starts the 22nd. The other girl's coming over next week just to see a little bit of what we're doing, but
Okay.
she doesn't officially start until the 22nd.
Okay. Well, we're going to try and direct people to using the drop box, because obviously when we were closed during the shutdown, people had to resort to using that, and I'm not sure what it is about people wanting to come in to drop something off when we've got a drop box they can simply pull up to and drop it off. But I can see if they have questions, but we need to promote the use of that. I mean, we've got two different drop boxes that are open 24/7. Miss Lane?
The reason most people are coming in is right now they're doing their taxes and they want to have a receipt for tax purposes to show that they paid it. And there are some people who are paying cash for their DPW bill and they want a receipt. So that's one of the
Okay.
reasons that there's this steady flow, and and so some of those won't change.
All right. Well, let's see if we can put our heads together in the next day or two and figure something out. But like I said, as a last resort, I would go to closing the office. But I guess it's always an option we can resort to. Mr. Atkins?
These are always good opportunities to look at what technology is available too, and encourage people to do more remotely from their own home, like they would pay most of their other bills. So if there's some of those things, we should also take that in consideration.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Out there now.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Atkins. Actually, one of the things that we're researching as we speak is there may be some funds available through some of the COVID money, stimulus money, what have you, for actually utilizing kiosks. I believe the city of Detroit actually utilizes kiosks around the city for residents to be able to pay water bills, at least, maybe even taxes, but parking tickets, you name it. And a kiosk is available 24/7, where people bring their bill in or punch in their address. I think everybody's used a kiosk at one time or another, whether it's to buy your license plate tabs or to pay your cell phone bill. I think people can do that at Verizon. So we are researching that. One of the companies that we looked into does not tie into our software BS&A. It'd be great if they had a system that tied into that, so that the accounting would be much easier. But if we were able to put a kiosk in the lobby, It would then make access 24/7 to receiving a receipt for the payment of taxes, your water bill, what have you. So, and especially if that kiosk would be paid for with stimulus money, all the better. So actually, we have a meeting tomorrow with another company that does the same thing. But you're right, if we can utilize technology, we have put in place the payment online to work much easier. Actually, people can call in and pay, by phone with a live receptionist if they choose to. But we're going to try and promote all those avenues a little bit more. So a good suggestion. So we will be having a meeting next week with regard to the roads. Anybody wants to listen in, we're going to bring in, like I said, the road commission, road engineering, what have you, and we'll be covering that. I think we're good. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? Ms. Lane?
I would so move, Mr. Supervisor, that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Okay, supported. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Massey supported that.
Mr. Massey.
And just one comment, gentlemen, besides the executive minutes, if you want to review them, at the front counter are your copies of the 2020, hard copies of the 2020 budget. So you need to come in and pick those up as well.
Good point, Ms. Lane. Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Guzak? Earl?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Adkins?
Yes.
Myself, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. Good night.
All right.
Right.